Good morning, everyone. The time being 10:05, we'll get going on our work session for today. And I will open the work session on HB 1203. Representative Platt.
To me, this is a no-brainer, ought to pass, because we had testimony that from the gaming industry that they don't mind, that they did need the rent at one time, but they don't anymore because the wages have gone up. And so would benefit charities, and they'd still do quite well.
Okay. Anybody else on HB 1203? Representative Almy.
So the idea would be that we send another bill to the Senate, trying to get them to move on this.
I'm not sure there's any opposition to the Senate. The idea is to remove the rent charged to charities, and we got testimony from the don't mind the gaming industry that they don't mind this. So I don't know what the objection would be from.
I don't either, but we don't know why Senator Lang is sitting on the bill that contains that.
So you're talking about SB 112, which we
Yeah.
passed out of the House with an amendment, and we'll see several bills today that are pieces of that bill. Yes, Representative Schenberg.
Yes, Representative Platt, on line 13, I'm sorry, line 15 through 17. Nope, I'll get it right here in a minute. Lines 18 and 19 says any service agreement entered into by the charitable organization shall be submitted with the charitable organization's license applications for review by the Lottery Commission. Does that mean all new, or is that all present ones will also be resubmitted?
I'm not expert, but I believe all of them would have to be submitted because it's a new. Every time you get a week or two, you have to submit.
Anybody else? Any other thoughts, comments? Representative Ames.
It's really the same question that Representative Almy raised. This other bill or bills, I don't know even whether there's another one floating around. It'd be really helpful to know what the status of the other bill that contains the same provision on rent is. And that's just a question. If there's, I'd like to have an answer if I could get one.
As far as we know at this point, they're sitting on that bill. Yes, Representative Doucette.
Yes, as I know it, or at least the information I have, is the Senator Lang has another piece of legislation that mimics what we passed, amended SB 112, with a couple changes. One can only surmise as to why that bill's being held over on that side. And like you said, we're going to see other components. I myself filed other pieces of legislation, which we'll hear one of them, I think, today, that were included in that amendment. So it's, I guess, that chairman's prerogative whether to bring that up or not. But I hear where you're coming from. We've already solved this problem. Why are we handling it in components at this point?
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
does
Schenberg.
just for the technical, Representative Platt is a very knowledgeable person, but on lines 18 and 19. But does the Lottery Commission, could they give an explanation? Will that be the case of resubmitting? All applications will come back to them if this is passed for them to look at?
Well, I see we have Director McIntyre in the audience.
Good morning. My name is Valerie King. I oversee the division that does the charitable gaming side of lottery. As far as 18 and 19 about us reviewing the agreements, we do that already, so it would just be a continuation. But while I'm up here, I just wanted to point out that, and this is noted in the fiscal note, that when they reworded the section, they eliminated the 35% goes to charities. So that language should be put back in. It doesn't say it anywhere else in the statute, so it needs to be here.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Representative Almond.
Thank you. While you're there, there is no fiscal note on this one, but can you tell us, since they repealed and reenacted, I hate these, could you tell us what has changed in this?
Yeah, and I can give you my copy. It was a fiscal note on the LSR that I can give you. And basically, when it repealed RSA 287-D:19 Roman numeral 2A, that is where it specified. I think it also mentioned rent, but as part of that same sentence, it said that the charity shall receive 35% of all the proceeds. And so when they took out the rent, they accidentally took everything out.
Could you repeat that on,
The reference, I can give
RSA.
this to you if you'd like.
great, if we could get copies.
I can give you this one. D is in dog. So it's RSA 287D colon 19, Roman numeral 2, and then A in parentheses. That's where it originally was located. And when they revised the language, they accidentally excluded it.
Hold on one second. Representative Ames.
Yeah, I mean, I had meant to bring that up, and I'm glad you did. And I think my belief is that we need to hold this bill and get an amendment to correct this mistake. It was unintentional; it just happened. And I'm all for this bill once we get it perfected.
Okay. Representative Platt.
Mr. Chair, I'll take it upon myself to get the amendment.
Thank you. Representative Almy.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that's the only thing that changed.
Well, that's the important part that changed, that's missing.
I'm sorry.
Are there any other little words here and there that might make a difference?
There was nothing that we identified other than the 35% was eliminated.
Representative Platt, would you like a co-sponsor on that?
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Would
I'll let you do the work.
Oh, was just about to suggest that you both look at the existing language and see if there's anything else.
So Representative Platt, can you see if by chance we might get that amendment for tomorrow's exec session?
As soon as I have a break from here.
Okay,
As soon as I have a break from here.
thank you. Anything else? Anybody else on this bill, HB 1203? Okay, seeing nothing else, we'll close the work session on HB 1203. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, I'll now open the work session on HB 1255 relative to historic horse racing moratorium. Representative Platt.
It's a simple enough bill. This is Representative Horrigan's bill, I believe. It's just extending the moratorium for a couple more years. But is that a good idea or a bad idea? I turn to Representative Doucette. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
I don't know. I think the committee's taken a position on that, so. But as far as I'm concerned, I'd vote an ITL on this.
Yeah. we have this we have the moratorium in the amendment on SB 112, but we also have, I believe there's another bill coming up. Not sure which number right now, but that's addressed as well. Yes,
And
Representative Fellows.
Can somebody please update me, like, if we do nothing, is there a moratorium and what is the date?
I believe if we do nothing, the moratorium ends in June of this year.
If we do nothing.
Microphone,
then the restriction goes
microphone, please.
Sorry, I thought I did it. If we do nothing, or if nothing is done to change the existing law, then the existing law that currently contains restrictions on who can run this kind of casino will continue without those restrictions. That's my understanding. Is that right?
It's
No,
it's
just-
specific to HHR, not the
Yeah,
whole
specific
charitable
to
gaming.
HHR and to the ability to open or not a new casino.
But it's June.
Yeah, it's in June. It just says that. We're trying to do something, as I understand it, to extend the limitation.
Yes. We have this in another bill coming up as well. I think, is it HB 1525? Okay, any other thoughts, comments, questions on HB 1255? All right, seeing none, close the work session on HB 1255. I'll open the work session on HB 1389. This bill would allow the winner of the state lottery to remain anonymous. Representative Platt.
I heard from the Lottery Commission they can already do that, but this would make it clear in the statute that they could, unless they give affirmative assent, that they are anonymous.
I think we will be good to hear from Director McIntyre.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Charlie McIntyre, Lottery Director. One of the things I should point out at first is the way this is drafted, it actually is impacting the Tri-State Lotto Compact. So I don't know if you can change it because it's an agreement between 3 states as to the exact language. And this exact language was negotiated by the 3 states in 1985. And the only person still remaining from that period of time is the first Governor Sununu, who signed the bill. And so when you make changes to the commission in this bill, you're changing the Tri-State Commission as to what they can and cannot do. And so you couldn't change, if a winner in New Hampshire won in Vermont, you can't change Vermont law. Obviously, it's jurisdictional and so the Lottery Commission for New Hampshire is RSA 284, which gave the Lottery Commission 541A authority under rulemaking, and our prize claiming is based on rulemaking through GLCAR.
Representative Almy.
Thank you. We had a discussion of this, and there were other things that Charlie mentioned that earlier that are difficult in just doing this in blanket form. They seem to hold lotteries in public with people, and everybody sees who won it, which you'd have to stop doing. I didn't know about those.
Yeah.
But what we wanted to do was hold it and form a study committee, which is something we haven't been using, but just get a few people together with Charlie and Valerie if Valerie, I guess Valerie isn't involved in this, but to work out a bill that does this but doesn't destroy things that are already going on that have nothing to do with anonymity. And also, I was thinking if we ought to look at the rules. If the rules don't say on when somebody comes to collect their money, you can tell them you can be anonymous or not. And I think we ought to put that in law.
If I could speak to that, Sharon?
Yes.
So there's a difference between confidentiality and publicity. And so we list all the winners who win over $600 on our website on a tab that's not particularly well looked at, very infrequently. But we actually ask the winners, if over $600, to sign a media form if indeed we're going to use their information or likeness on our social media, and they sign it that they agree to do it, and they fill out their name and address and even who's in the photograph with them. And so I looked at this, I did some research with our trade association. We're in the middle ground of keeping folks anonymous. There are some states where it is absolutely forbidden. You have to give your name. It's public regardless. And then there are some states that absolutely keep it secret. They're like Montana. They can be anonymous forever. And we're in the middle where it's, if you wanted to, we're not going to publicize your name unless we ask you to. We actually had a firefighter win a big prize 2 weeks ago. Would have been a great story. He didn't sign. We don't talk about it. And then there's some states that have a dollar value. Over 10,000, you can be anonymous. $250,000, you can be anonymous. $500,000, 10 million. But if you go on, it's a lot of work. It would be a lot of work to publicize all of our winners. There are almost 1,000 a month. So that's just information for the committee's consideration.
Representative Platt.
Given that, I wasn't opposed to the idea of a study committee, but given what Director McIntyre just said, do we need this bill at all, or any bill like it?
Right now, are there rules that govern that anonymity?
No, it's actually just,
Form or-
we do it out of courtesy, candidly, for our player base. Nobody wants to service our players more than I do, candidly. And so if somebody doesn't want to be on publicity, for whatever reason, we won't. We just won't. Absent them signing a document saying, sure, I'll be publicity. And it's not, I can hand the form out if you want. It's not like it's fine print. It's very much like, hey, I agree to do this. So, it's obviously your choice, but it would require some work because we'd have to change jail car rules as well. And we'd have to rewrite this bill into 284 as to where it fits because there's not really any language of 284 as to prize claiming. That's not done by rule as part of our relationship with our players.
So one of the reasons you're using this form instead of putting it in rules, the rules could then be in not violation, but in conflict with the tri-state lottery.
Correct. And there is no conflict with our other associations, but that one's codified in law. I don't know why it was done that way. The tri-state is very unique in the sense of it was the first multi-state agreement that ever existed for lotteries to pool players for liquidity purposes.
Okay. Representative Orrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. So in the couples case we talked about last time, Charlie Temple was involved.
Yes.
Did they sign that document?
No.
Oh.
No, very much no. In fact, so we have a rule. I need to check to see that you're an eligible person to play. So that, like for me, for example, or my wife can't play. So we check to make sure you're not on an eligible list. Also that you don't have an offset for child support. So I was ordered by Judge Temple specifically to check to make sure that person was not ineligible. But I only kept their identity secret. So only myself and one other person knew their identity. And so that's Judge Temple's order.
Thank you.
Representative Fellows.
So there's a difference between publicizing somebody's name and keeping it private. So right now you don't publicize anybody's name unless they agree.
Well, there's a list on our website that's kept under winners
Right,
list
right.
every month.
Right.
And I will tell, I would ask the question almost from my seat is, has this been a problem for anybody of the folks you represent? Most of the vast majority of the winners that walk into my office win 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. That's not, difficulty money. That's, you're buying a round that night for everybody, but you're not, being hounded for car loans and stuff. And so I've personally not heard of an issue other than the big winners that would have an issue. And candidly, almost to a person, they've come in with legal representation. And candidly, I will give that advice always when they walk in. Go find a lawyer, just do it right. Because you don't want, not just a lawyer, you're going to want an accountant for tax purposes as well. So the fact that we allow trusts, and we do, has quelled what I would suggest is a problem for the folks who would have trouble with, people.
So,
Follow up?
yeah.
Sorry.
So I'm trying to figure out, let's forget about the small amounts.
Yeah.
We're going to 10, what if I win 10 million tri-state megabucks and at the same time or a different day, I win 10 million in Powerball because megabucks, you've told me the rules are different.
Yes.
So can somebody under right to know or something or other, even if I don't want it publicized, can somebody find out?
If you claim in your own name, the answer is
Correct.
yes. If you claimed in your own name, the answer would be yes. Somebody would find out.
How did they find
Well,
out?
it would be on our website under the list of winners, and then they would be subject to 91A record requests, absent you going to court and getting a court order because you filed it in your own name.
Just one more question. So you told us there are some states that just nothing is, how could we make it be not public if it's over a certain amount? And they sign their name.
We'd have to rewrite RSA 284, and then obviously I don't know the process when a law trumps a jail car rule, how that works.
So I'm on JELCAR.
Okay, yeah,
JELCAR has to conform to what the statute is. Statute comes first.
of course.
And if the statute were to change to be inconsistent with the rules would have to be changed.
I don't mean I just never experienced it. It's never happened before for us.
Did lottery have a position on this bill?
Yeah, we're opposed to it. We're actually, if you're looking at the spectrum, we're in the middle ground. Folks who win enough money can figure out a way to claim anonymously. And candidly, the players will often on social media kind of support the decision to claim in a trust for lots of reasons. There's also tax benefits as well. I imagine. I didn't study tax law. But it makes it hard for us. Like, for example, the way this bill was written, 14-point font, that it's anonymous unless we get them to sign essentially like a mortgage payment. It makes our job harder. And like as Representative Almy suggested, when I said before, we do a number of drawings publicly where we give away a bunch of money, and we wouldn't be able to do any of those either. And they're very popular and very noteworthy. Every time we do it at the track, it's almost always on MEOR that night and in press everywhere. So,
Okay, thank you. Representative Wards.
Would you believe I find this bill, we should ITL this.
Representative Platt.
I could agree with Representative Orrs, but I do like the idea of interim studying it so that we could put a committee together and see if we can't come up with something acceptable to the Lottery Commission, which accomplishes the purpose.
Well, it wouldn't be Representative Doucette.
Just a real quick question for the director. On average, annually, prizes above, say, $5 million.
annually, you're talking
Rough guess.
1 or 2. Yeah, it's really it's a low number. I mean, we have been fortunate in the last 6 years. We've had 3 winners over 100 million, which is, we were just named, well, not just, about 6 months ago, the luckiest state in the country. That's so statistically anomalous, I can't even describe it. But other than those 3, it's once a year.
Representative Rochert.
Thank you. And so just looking at the law, I've heard what you said. I've read the law, the current law, not what's being proposed here. And so tell me if I'm misunderstanding this. What the law says is, I'm going to read it because I'm not an attorney, but it says the financial, tax, trust, or personal records filed, received, maintained, or produced by the commission in connection with payment of a prize as provided in this section shall be confidential. Period. Then it goes on to say something which I think that, my colleague across the way asked us, but it does say such records shall not be deemed public records under 91A. So they would be confidential then, correct? If I'm understanding 91A?
So you're citing 287. Yeah,
287 F10, yes.
So that, like I said, that's the tri-state compact. So that only applies to tri-state tickets.
Okay.
It
Okay.
doesn't
So
apply
this,
to, so when it says commission there, it means the tri-state commission,
Okay.
not the New Hampshire Lottery Commission. And if I understand the 1985 logic, financing statements referred back then to how we paid for the prize payments going forward.
so if I may, so the commission, Tri-State Commission, 1985, I'm assuming that had to do with Tri-State Megabucks that came about
Yes.
that time. So this doesn't even apply to
Everything-
Powerball, Mega Millions.
98% of what we sell.
So this is, I would agree with interim study. I mean, this is not what the co-sponsors wanted. I believe even. So
No, and we weren't consulted on it. So
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't have drafted it to 287.
yeah, I don't believe it's ready. I mean, I couldn't go along with this.
Okay, I just want to make sure people understand the difference between interim study and creating a study committee. So I'm not, so where do you stand on that?
If the committee feels like this is a pressing issue to move forward, which I as somebody who values privacy, I think a study committee would be appropriate moving forward with this.
Representative
But
Platt? Oh,
if
sorry.
it's the purview of the committee, I could go either way, I guess is what I'm saying. Anything but OTP.
If we form a committee, does that have to be enacted into law or could be an informal committee? Yeah. So just an informal committee. So interim study this, form an informal committee, work with Director McIntyre to come up with something acceptable for next term.
Representative Almy?
So I want
Well,
to just make,
okay.
oh, I'm sorry.
Representative Almy had her hand up first. Did you have
I just wanted to point out that we could have a subcommittee on this, which is the term for it, and then if they can't come to a conclusion in time for getting the bill in, it's interim study.
That's a possibility. It could be a tall order to get that in line in time, but Representative Ames.
I guess I'm jumping the line.
Representative Fellows.
So the words that you read to us about the tri-state compact, can we just use those same words to apply to everything over 5 million or 2 million or something like that?
I'd really want to look at it in terms of crafting it deliberately. I don't like sort of doing this on the shooting from the hip on
Okay.
legal changes, but
But right now, if you win tri-state megabucks, then your name automatically is, you'd have to ask to make your name public.
correct.
Representative Ames.
Yeah. I think it's clear that this bill is not an ought to pass bill, and the question is it could be an ITL, but in terms of studying it and trying to figure out maybe there is something here, and it's not, the expression goes, just a solution looking for a problem. And I think there's something genuine lurking behind this about privacy and confidentiality, and at least being definitively assured that it is okay the way we are now. And I have no doubt about it that you're balancing all these interests and making it come out in a good way. And I sort of lean towards ITL for that reason. But if we're going to study it, I think you alluded to the difficulties. If we do a study committee within the existing frame before the deadline for reporting this bill out, it's really going to be hard to do anything meaningful. And if we do interim study, this is an election year, and I think there's room for interim studies on important issues. I don't know whether realistically, I mean, the other people can judge this. I'm perfectly willing to participate in an interim study on this particular issue, but it does line up besides a whole host of other pressures that each of us have on our time. And so I'm not sure what I'm recommending. I'm thinking out loud, I guess, as I say these things.
Yes, thank you for those thoughts. I think, I mean, the other way this can go is if it goes ITL. It certainly does not stop those who are passionate about this area to work on it and come up with a bill for next year. Did you have some?
No, I just say next year. I was just saying, but yeah, given what you just said, I guess I could go with ITL because an interim study might be the same result. But come up with a bill for next year.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you. We'll close the work session on HB 1389. I'll now open the work session on HB 1525 relative to historic horse racing game operator employer licensing. Okay. Yeah. I need
Do we
tabs.
have a draft amendment? Because you said that it had an error in it. That was the other one?
Sorry. There's a drafting error in this, and I have yet to produce that. My bad. I can get that done today.
That'd be great. Yeah, if we could, we potentially could exec it tomorrow. And I think the drafting error was on line 4. The word approved should be applied for. That was it. Okay. Yeah. Representative Almy.
And I think somebody just said that this is the one that we could put our moratorium back on.
Correct. I filed this this component, which is, part of the amended SB 112, prior to us voting on that amendment. And my apologies for not getting the amended version here for you.
Yeah, but this one right now has the moratorium in it?
This is a full moratorium
Oh, okay.
after the
Oh,
date,
yeah.
inclusive
there
of
is.
this. It's
Right.
basically the same language that we put in amended SB 112. It's just that one component.
Yeah, and just to be clear, although we don't have the amendment here today, it's a simple change on line 4. Approved by would change to applied for. You mean applied?
Applied for to the Lottery Commission. It's just English, that's all.
Oh, we're missing the word too. Okay. All right.
Yes, I don't want to let this slip away. I just want to make sure we get the right amendment. So on line 4, we'd add in the pending applications. I understand that. I was just looking down further. Where it we have the language, a game operator employer holding a license prior to October 18, 2023 shall be eligible, et cetera. Is that need to have the application in it?
I think that's a good catch.
So that's line 8 also.
No, that's,
No, line 8's okay.
Then figure out, get the applicants.
So, Representative Ames, you're saying the word "to" was missing on line 10, is that?
No, line 10 is, shall be eligible. Oh, it's back at the very beginning of the line.
But the license
It refers to
referred
holding
is
a
charitable
license.
gaming.
Here, let's see. A game operator, the sentence that begins on line 9, game operator employer holding a license prior to October 18 shall be eligible for licensure to sell. And maybe that's all right as it stands. I don't know whether we need to have the light.
Your microphone.
There too. I'm sorry.
All right. Representative Doucette, do you see a issue with that wording? From
What?
the end of line 9 through line 10?
I think it probably would cover if we inserted holding and or applied for, something to that effect.
Okay.
My recommendation is that Representative Doucette take it away to the drafting attorney and make sure that included in the group that can go forward with this type of games are the applicants that we're talking about in the first line, at line 4. That wouldn't somehow in the rest of the language we haven't dropped them. That's all. And
Yeah. Okay. Representative Platt.
Okay, this is a permanent moratorium. Is the permanent moratorium permanent, or something we could visit 2 or 3 years? Because I'm not sure.
Well, it's Representative Platt. It's the same thing that applies all the time. One legislature cannot hold the next legislature to something. So next year it could be changed.
I'd like to speak to that too,
Yes,
if I may.
Representative Ames.
Exactly right about the legislature having the last word at any point in time. We're trying to get this moratorium straightened out before the statute that sets limits expires. We're trying to get a bill through and adopted by the legislature that's more or less right, as best we can determine before that time, July 1, I think, of this year. In the meantime, a commission that Representative Doucette and I think Representative Janagian sit on, is working on the larger question, a larger set of questions related to gaming that, in a general sense, include this issue. It may well be that out of that work comes a solution that's different from what we're talking right now. This just gets us into a position that's acceptable going forward until something else comes along. And that again endorses your point that the legislature in the end can move in a different direction.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Representative Platt.
So what I'm hearing is ought to pass as amended when we get the amended.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to end the work session. Yeah, Representative
Can
On.
I just ask, is there anything that can be done about transferring licenses?
In what regard? What's the
Well, we
question?
now have one owner who owns at least 4 of these casinos. One of them, they haven't finished building yet. That's the one in Lebanon. But on monopolizing all of these things does not seem like a very good idea.
Representative, yes, Ames.
It's really the same point. The commission definitely has that question before it, and that'll be part of what we're trying to figure out.
Representative Doucette, did you have?
I totally agree with Representative Ames. Although in here, I'm going to hold my commentary. In here, it does speak of not transferring or selling the license.
Well, you're discussing that. It's obviously been sold.
Okay. We all set on this one? All right. Close the work session on HB 1525. I'll now open the work session on HB 1549 relative to buy-in amount deductions collected during the operation of games of chance. Representative Plett.
I'm all right with ought to pass on this one. We heard eloquent testimony from Representative Doucette that it limited cap the amount to $250 because people won't pay more than that. It would just cripple the ability to have pots bigger than that.
I have a
Representative Ames.
question for the lottery. So the language that we have in front of us provides for the amount that's collected from the players, the buy-in amount collected from the players, that there shall be deducted from that 35%. 30% of that total amount is to be paid to the charity, and the balance retained by the game operator employer. My question is, what about the state tax?
So the state tax is not taken in the same way. It's taken out before
Okay,
this division, so
So we're all set.
it won't affect the state revenue.
Representative Fellows.
So I forgot to bring my copy of the bill, but I remember it. So if we cut back that amount, who loses or wins in that situation?
Ideally, no one loses. It would be taking less, but you'd have more activity. If you're taking, so I know this is going to sound odd, but the less the house takes, usually the more the house makes. Make sense?
Not my
Follow up.
question.
Sorry.
So what we're so which part of the money? So based on the pot, the buy-in fee is a certain amount of money. The buy-in fee is a certain amount of money, which is now split how? And which part are we changing?
So it's a little bit different than before. It used to be that 80%, the whole pot, you took 80% goes back in prizes and 20% is split. Now it's sort of the same thing, except that 20% is capped. And it's not expected to create a huge loss. It's not really going to impact it that much. It will be a slight impact, but we're not expecting a big impact from that slight readjustment.
If I could, it's only in play in very large games, which there are not many. I can't think of one actually, and I can't think of one where this would apply currently. So it's not a loss. It's trying to make it so that you could have a larger game where the payout to the players was higher, or the takeout from the house was less. However we want to look at it. And I think Representative Doucette could probably explain it better than I could.
Representative Doucette.
Well, I think, and your concern I share, it does not change what the state revenue and most importantly, the charities get for revenue. It doesn't change their 35% hard stop. What it does is that the monies that are collected for that purpose are capped at 20% as it is now. If there's a larger game or a room wants to run a super duper Super Bowl of poker, it would cap that rake, that return, that revenue for the charities at $250. So it doesn't change the 35%. And I think that's where you're getting to, Representative. Maybe I'm incorrect, but it does not change what the revenue is for the charities or the state at the end of the day.
Let me just ask a question first. Wasn't there something here where if the number got too large, it discouraged larger players?
Well, exactly. And like the director said, there's no history here. Nobody's run a big buy-in tournament like that. They do it at some of the bigger casinos in Vegas, etc. This was both from the operators and poker players that asked for this because they saw this as, I'm not going to pay $500 for a $2,500 buy-in if somebody chose to run that. I don't think we're going to have a big flood of these huge tournaments. It just kind of gives them some guardrails
And it sounds like it's potentially been an impediment. We're not going to see a huge inflow, but it's potentially been an impediment that gets removed.
exactly.
Representative Fellows.
I thought, let's suppose with this bill and with the way it is now versus this bill, and you had exactly the same number of players. What would be different?
I'm wondering if I might. What do you mean the exact same number of players? And what the director's saying too is you'll get 100 players.
I just want to understand the math. So if you had the same number of players with current statute versus this one, what changes?
Nothing unless that game is above what would it be, 1250? Anything above 1250 would, if the buy-in was 1250, meaning the take back, the rake was 250, okay, at 20%. No.
2,500.
No.
Let's see.
I-
20%. 20% of 1250 is 250. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you would max at a tournament that the buy-in would be $1,250. 250 of that, so 1,000 would go to the player pool. 250 would go. Wouldn't change the math at all. If the buy-in is 1,500, we're talking another 20% on top of that. This would cap it at 250.
So basically, to use that example, he just said if the buy-in was 1,500, then then instead of 250, it would go to 300. And the problem, as we heard in the public session, is you're less likely to get. These players are going to go other places where because 20% is high as the numbers get bigger. So, okay, what is your?
Poker players are a strange breed. And they will not come out for that. They just won't. It gives them this opportunity. Like I said, I don't think I'm speaking wrong when I say this doesn't change how much money the charities are getting. This, quite frankly, gives them an opportunity to make more money because we'll have, if there's a premium tournament, there'll be more players that come in, benefit from that, and the peripheral play, et cetera, et cetera.
Representative Lee, please. Okay. Are you all set?
I,
Representative Platt?
used to be in sales part of my career, so I like to repeat what I heard to make sure I understand it. Right now, we're giving up nothing, and there's a potential to make more money as a result of this cap. And I'm also hearing ought to pass.
Succinctly put, yes, Representative Leapley.
We're not giving up nothing. It's math, right? Like, you're saying that if we go above this number, we no longer collect 20%. It's capped at 250. So we're giving up, if we do run a bigger game, we're not getting 20%.
Well,
Right.
The point is,
technically,
we're not running a bigger game.
My question is, why would we want to? Like, why do we allow gambling in the state?
well, technically what you said is correct. The reason we are giving something up is because nobody is willing to play those higher numbers, because as soon as you get into numbers like that, they'll go to Massachusetts or somewhere else to
And
play that. So you're
I'm not sure
getting
what the advantage is to run a bigger game when we're getting the same amount of money, right?
Well, you
If you're capping
potentially,
it.
so those players may not even be coming to play. They may be going to other states. So you are potentially getting players that wouldn't have even played. So that's why you're getting more. Representative Fellows.
Yeah, so I would like to say that we only raised that cap last year. And so I don't know what the effective date is. It might have been July 1st, but might have been a little bit later than that. So we don't really know if they're going to, how many people we're keeping away from playing, because we haven't even been through a whole year yet. I don't know, maybe they don't like to gamble as much in the winter. The snow scares them away, but we don't, I hear the sales pitch about, you're going to get more money if you lower, essentially it's marketing. You're going to get more money if you lower the price. You're going to get more customers if you lower the price. That may be true, but it may not be true also. We really don't have any data that proves it one way or the other at this point.
All right. Anything else? We'll close the work session on HB 1549. Okay, I'm going to open the work session on CACR 15. Providing that a 2/3 vote is required to pass legislation imposing new or increased taxes. All right, we're done with that last one. Representative Platt.
I have difficulty with 2/3, even to apply to fees. And I know some states have passed this. And Representative Spilsbury's not here at the moment, but he asked a question during the public hearing, would 60% be acceptable? I just want to float that out and see if there's appetite for 60%. I can't go for 2/3.
A question for Representative Platt. Representative, are you saying you want to change the number downward to 1/2?
It is 1/2 now.
Well, are you saying you want to go lower?
Did not say that.
Okay, I just want to make sure I hear it.
I think all he's asking is there an appetite for something else, but we'll decide. Yeah, Representative. Okay. Representative Elmy.
Just briefly, aside from the damage that it would do to the state at some future time, the damage it would do to our bond rating is considerable. When a state does not have enough resources to pay back for essential kinds of services, the bond rating starts to thinking about when are we going to stop paying for our bond payments. And particularly, of course, when you're putting in everything to do with state bonds, but it applies more generally to the ability of the state to pay for its services.
Representative Elberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When Representative Osborne was here to introduce the bill last week, one of the things he said was that we have low taxes due to good money management. Now, I would like to believe that I manage my money well, and sometimes that means having enough money to, well, often it means having enough money to pay my bills, and just deciding that I don't want to have as much money because whatever reason I can't find an analogy to taxes. If we don't have enough money to pay our bills and we don't have enough money to pay for likely future bills, then then deciding that any ways to increase revenues is a bad money management practice in my mind. We are likely to have increasing education responsibilities from 2 lawsuits that are coming up, and making sure that we can't fund them is not good money management in my mind. When I asked Representative Osborne if lowering taxes or fees or not allowing new taxes or fees requiring the same 2/3 majority, he said no. He said, in fact, that maybe we would only need 1/3 to pass lowering taxes or fees. I find this particularly disturbing. The outcome will absolutely be increasing property taxes for our citizens, for our constituents. And that's, to me, that's about the worst way we can go about looking at increasing taxes. I want to just mention one anecdote, and this is a totally non-representative survey. My husband and I really enjoy going out to eat at diners. We're big diner people. We went to a diner in Hudson the other day, Susie's. We love Susie's. And I asked the waitress, you know, if this restaurant tax were to be lowered, how would you feel about that? She said, that's great. You know, I can always, every little bit helps. I said, if you knew that as a result of lowering this tax, your property taxes would have to be raised to cover the loss of revenue from something like that, how would you feel? She said, I'll pay the extra 20 cents on my restaurant bill. I think we have constituents who are smart enough to understand that when you take an action, it has not just the expected consequence, but the secondary consequence that we need to follow. What I think of as the A to B to C rule. A lot of people go from A to B and we don't think about what happens from B to C. Well, B to C is not a good idea, and I cannot in any conscience vote to support this.
Okay, Representative Lukley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Along the lines of like following logic to its conclusion, Representative Osborne spoke on behalf of the EFA vouchers that passed on Thursday, and that spending is not held to a 2/3 approval rate. So we just approved spending, I think it's over $45 million more, not in a budget year. And that was not held to a 2/3 approval rate. So it doesn't make sense that when you're budgeting, you would hold raising money to this high standard and not spending money. So we can continue to increase how much we're spending and make it harder for us to raise funds to balance the budget. So to me, this is an ITL as well. Thank you.
Well, the example you just gave, I would think, or not think, but operates within the current law. If the current law changed to 2/3, then that 2/3 would have been subject to a bill that requires spending money, if I understand what you're saying.
So if I'm this bill, it's on increasing taxes, right? 2/3 is required to increase taxes,
Right.
but 2/3 is not required to increase spending. That's not addressed in the bill.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So that's my concern, is that it's just as easy to spend money, which we just spent a bunch of money on Thursday. Not in a, like, I don't know where that money's going to come from. We did our budget last year. So it seems to me that that's introducing more imbalance into the system to make it harder to raise money, but it's not making it harder to spend it. So we could continue to up, education vouchers, for example, but not be able to fund that because we can't get 2/3. So it's just an analogy, like what would that look like next time?
Representative Ullery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having put forward a bill like this before and heard the argument that if we're going to restrict raising taxes, we should restrict spending. We already restrict spending based upon the amount of revenue the state has because we have a balanced budget requirement in our Constitution. Therefore, that's not a valid argument in my opinion because it already exists. The one is directly related to the other based upon the amount of revenue that comes forward. So if we're talking about increasing taxes on our neighbor, that indicates that we weren't watching how we were spending our neighbor's money. And also, to equate EFA programs is a non sequitur, in my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Elmy.
Thank you. We have a balanced budget. It is only balanced until people come and put in new spending, which we did last week. And then sometimes in harder times, when I came into the legislature, we had mostly had Republican governors. They'd made a habit out of spending more than we were getting in revenue and leaving the deficit to the next governor. That finally ended when we got Democratic governors in, and people wouldn't be as interested in doing that. And I don't think at this point the present governor has done that, partly because we have huge amounts of money coming in from the feds. That is now ending. This also talks about license fees, and I'd like to take us through a little history of that. When I became chair of Ways and Means for the first time, we had a lot of bills put in by professional associations and the snowboard, the snowmobiles associations in particular stuck with me. A lot of different associations that had a license fee which had not been changed in 25 years. And during that time, as now, there had been inflation, and they weren't getting the services that they expected from that license fee anymore because there wasn't enough money in the license fee. We raised, I think, 25, 30 fees that year and the next year from people who came before us and said, we need this done because we want to make sure that the snowmobile paths get properly dusted, leveled, and We need this done because we're way behind in licensing these people. Because we've only got one person doing it because we can't afford any more than that. And snowmobilers stick with me because afterwards they went to their members and said, they raised our fees. As if it was a bad idea, but they were the ones who'd asked for it. On the next term, when the O'Brien legislature was in place, they put in two people put in almost identical bills that undid everything we'd done, including cutting a couple of things that were didn't need them. And we had a 6-hour hearing about those. And we had a 6-hour hearing because we asked the people who'd asked for the money to come in and explain to us why they needed the money. And they then quietly shelved the bills, which in the O'Brien time was quite something. So that's a kind of a microcosm of what's happening when we're cutting taxes that are less easily identifiable as the service that we need. That has increased, inflation has increased the cost of. And if we have been cutting quite a few taxes in recent years. We have had help from the federal government each time that disguised problems with this. And we are at a juncture right now where if we passed something like this, we definitely would go from the 66% of taxes being paid as property taxes to considerably more than that, and then probably into destruction. We're already seeing destruction because there are too many people who can't afford to live here and are moving away.
Yes, Representative Orrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I do agree with Rep. Bami, and we got to be careful about taking any more additional cuts. If I understand EFAs correctly, though, we did not add to the spending. I thought the money follows the student. So if the money follows the student goes to a public charter school or a Montessori school or whatever, the money's just moving. It's like we're taking it here and we're following it here. So there's no increase in the budget as far as, or the spending. That's one point. Second point would be, yes, Representative Osborne did say that, I forget who asked the question, and that the taking, reducing the taxes would only take a third vote. He was obviously being facetious. I'd like everybody to recall that, because I came back and asked him, I said, well, you really meant, or you really would do 50% plus one. And he said, yes. So he wasn't serious about that. I mean, that's, I thought, pretty obvious. So I think we need to be careful how we do this. But, I see the same thing happening. We raise taxes and then we, reduce taxes. And I would like to see some stability there, even if it was an amendment where if we do something in the first year, we're not going to do it in the second year. We're going to just let it ride for a year and then we revisit it. When you're raising the rate and you're lowering the rate, it's hard to get a gauge on it. The other thing that I asked Representative Osborne for, if you would recall, is that I asked him to provide proof of his theory of, and we've all heard it before, Ronald Reagan called it trickle down. That was a term used, I think, in the late 18th century also, so it wasn't new to Reagan. But there is proof that sometimes you reduce taxes, you raise revenue. And Rep. Ulrey over here loves to talk about the laughing curve. And it is a little, but there's that sweet spot. And when we keep jerking things around, I think we should be letting it ride. Now, Representative Platt already announced this morning to some of you that were here earlier that some of us already got called out. Yours truly here for voting against a bill I co-sponsored to not reduce the tax. So I'm hearing what you're saying, but I mean, we need to work together and balance this thing out. But you know, we're not pumping up the spending by supporting EFAs. Thank you very much.
Well, I think to some of your point there, the evening out this thing, because we do see, you know, one party gets in, you know, and the other, and taxes bounce around. I think the intent here by Representative Osborne was to even that out and to smooth it out. You know, I'll just point out too, if you look at, I don't want to diminish, and I don't, the idea that there are times when, you know, we have to be mindful of our income and expenses and getting revenue in. However, I would remind you, look at a state like California. There's no limit to how much they can keep raising taxes. And the last thing I heard is they're running a $48 billion deficit. So there's obviously, it's a complex interaction. There's a lot of things going on, but sometimes I think, you know, we've got to be careful not to make it too simplistic. Representative Ulrich, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, Representative Ames.
Yeah.
Okay, Representative
Who's
Ames.
next?
Thanks. First, the latest news from California is $18 billion instead of 48. So they're moving
They're getting better.
closer, but $18 billion in the context of New Hampshire sounds like, I don't know, something that you can't even think of.
I think that was accounting trickery we talked about last week.
Yeah, I don't know. And then just a comment on the EFA discussion. I think we all know that many of the recipients of funds through that program receive them for kids that have never entered into the public schools. So that there's it's a new cost, and that's recognized by the budget people. I'm not saying anything that's out of order. I think that's very clear. But I don't want to dwell on that. I think my general attitude towards this bill is that for a very, very long time, perhaps the life of this state as a state within a federal system, the rule has been a majority rule, deciding budgets and other matters of importance by majority votes. And when it comes to fiscal matters, we've managed to, as a state and the community within the state, to find our way forward and through the maze of complicated choices that have to be made, just like at the household that was spoken of by Representative Elberger. These are complicated choices, but we don't handicap one approach over the other by a special rule that would apply in this case to new or increased taxes or license fees. And I think we should stick with majority rule. And I could say a lot about how I wish we made different choices, but I'm not going to do that. I'll keep fighting for those choices, and I'm probably be discussing in hopefully a polite way different points of view with my other colleagues in this room. But why go to this 2/3 vote requirement at this time? We've had this system in place for a long time. It's honored by all the decision making that's occurred over the years. We don't need to handicap it in this way.
Representative? I don't see a hand up. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
looking past the mic.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about
I'm
that.
okay.
Me too.
Thanks.
No, I
Represent,
did have my hand up.
Representative Elmy.
I've developed a couple of things here. One, schools have major on fixed costs. Even if you are taking people out of the schools usually can cut very little unless they're starting to cut things that the community thinks are important, like arts and stuff. So, what that happens then is that it goes on the property tax. Second, California is a referendum state, and they got in serious trouble because of that. They were raising, they frequently were not raising taxes, or they were stopping tax raises from going through at the same time that they were voting for major new benefits that cost a lot of money. And it was a crazy system. I'm not sure how it is that they're getting out of it. Third, the Democrats, we haven't been in that often, but when we have been in, the only times that we've raised any taxes other than the tobacco tax that I can remember. And the tobacco tax was done to try to stop young people from on smoking. And it seemed to be the only thing that anyone could prove would stop young people from smoking. But aside from that, we did raise the fees when people came to us and said it's been 20, 25 years of inflation. We only raised the taxes when we got to the major recessions. And we seem to get the recessions.
Representative Illury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the representative from Hanover for just Lebanon, close enough. Yeah, they're liberal up there. You can't tell one from the other. Well, one's to the left and one's to the right.
Let's keep our remarks focused on the bill at hand.
The comments that Representative Almy made, to my mind, prove the validity of the bill. Because when we look at the increase in the tobacco tax, the increase in the trail maintenance fee, the registration fee, various other tax increases that have passed both this committee under both Norm's and Susan's leadership, Representative Majors and Representative Almy's leadership, have passed by a substantial margin. 18-2, 20-0. That's better than the 2/3. That's 100%. And when they get to the floor, they pass by the 2/3 because there was a justification for it. There was an argument, presentation, and due diligence and debate that took place, as was outlined, which is the way it should be. And as the comments were made regarding California and a couple of other states, if you don't have those restrictions, then it becomes too easy to wind up with massive spending and massive taxes. So that's something to be taken into consideration.
Thank you. Representative Elberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I ask Representative Ullery a question? And this,
Sure.
go right
ahead.
to it. I don't have an answer, so I'm asking you. We do have a couple of lawsuits that may require state funding a good deal more of public education. Let's assume that that happens just for argument's sake. If we then have to fund a significantly larger education bill or bills, and I don't mean this kind of bill, I mean this kind of bill, how would you suggest we go about doing that when my guess is that there would not be a 2/3 majority supporting increased funding?
If a court order takes place, the bill is going to be paid one way or another because it is a court order. So there's no this, and if you read it, that has an escape clause in those, in that requirement. The same argument could be said for bonds that were due. It's the same exact argument. It's required to be paid. It's going to be paid, period. How we pay it, that's up to fiscal. And, you know, we take money from Peter to pay Paul, but eventually that's going to be done. Now, my other question is, what did you have at Susie's? I'd like the Californian. What did you have at Susie's? I like the Californian.
We can take that offline, given that the time is getting close to 11:30. Yes, Representative Fellows.
I would just like to ask, where is this escape clause that says we would have to raise taxes or do whatever else is needed to pay for a court order? I don't see it in this bill.
If I may,
Yes.
on second page, the escape clause I think Representative Ulrich's talking about is lines 4 through 7, which means the treasurer is going to take all the money that we would use for operating in the state for paying our services and everything, and is going to put it toward that court order, which leaves us no money to do our pay for our citizen services. So that I think is where he came from, but
That's about right. That current law.
Well, and I think the point that Representative Osborne had made was, if you get to that point, the citizens are going to be very upset. There's going to be pressure on the legislature to act. Yes, Representative Fellows.
So what I read in that is that has to do with bond payments. Doesn't have to do with any court order for school funding, anything like that.
Anybody else? Anybody we haven't heard from? Any new ideas, thoughts, questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the work session on
One thing, that's a real taxing discussion.
Thank you for that. We'll close the work session on CACR 15. I'm going to open the work session on HB 116 relative to eliminating the fee to file as a candidate for the Office of State Representative. Representative Plett.
Yeah, there's 400 of us. This would be $800 worth of lost revenue. But let's say there's 2 or 3 candidates for each election. So that instead of 800, it becomes 1,600 or 2,400. The idea, this is small potatoes. We're getting paid $100 a year. Can we save $2? And the most of that cost is eaten up by trying to collect it.
So your final conclusion was what?
That this is the money that's collected is minimal, $800, maybe up to $2,400 for the entire state, and the process of having to collect it and keep track of it eats up some of that.
Oh, I see. Okay. Representative Almy.
Thank you. We discussed this also, and I think we confirmed that the fee is paid to the clerk, and that this is all the clerk gets for doing all that paperwork for us. So we didn't think we ought to do this.
Yes, Representative
Just
Fellows.
to add quickly to that statement, that if we were municipal and county and not Ways and Means, we would probably be looking at this and saying, you know, maybe we should be raising the amount, not cutting it to zero, because if you cut it to zero, then this makes it an unfunded mandate.
Representative Ellery.
I don't know if there's a section in law that says that the town clerk can't charge the $10 mandatory fee for giving or taking an oath. Because they could eliminate this and then start charging $10 each time you gave your oath when you,
I don't think so. I don't think that would work.
Representative Leapley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like the name of this is a little misleading because it seems like it's about $2. What concerns me more is if I wanted to run for governor, I would have to come up with $10,000 instead of 100. Am I reading this right? So it seems like A and B are like a bigger concern to me than F in this bill. I don't think you should have to come up with $10,000 to run for governor. So I guess that one's a bigger concern to me.
That's not in this bill.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So I know where she's getting it from. She's getting it from the fiscal note. But if you look at the fiscal note, this fiscal note was written on October of 2022. So I don't think the fiscal note goes with this bill.
So are we talking about HB 116?
Yes.
So I'm looking online, so it doesn't have line numbers. But it's Roman numeral 1, candidates for governor, and then you look down to A, B, C, D, E, F.
All I have on my sheet is 3 lines.
The bill itself is only about state representatives. The fiscal note seems to be an attempt last session.
Thank you. So I'm looking at
Oh, you're looking at the original bill
the
instead of the amended.
original bill. Thank you for
Okay.
clarifying that. This whole time I've been looking at the wrong version. Thanks. So as amended is what I want.
Oh, here's this.
Representative Boyce.
My concern about taking away the $2 fee and not raising it, I'm just concerned, are we going to have a flood of candidates that just might come in and, want to put their name on the ballot because it's free? I mean,
Let's hope so.
When they hear about it, they'll think.
That's what I did.
it's not, well, the point is when it's, the announcement comes out, if you will, for lack of a better way of saying it, oh, I can register for free. I mean, it would seem likely that it would make more sense to raise the fee than to eliminate the fee.
Can we do that?
I mean, in my mind, there's some cost for each town to do the paperwork. So, I personally can go either way on this, but I'm more inclined to just leave this the way it is, leave the $2, because if the $2 is a barrier to entry for you to apply for state representative, then you have bigger problems because you're only going to get $100 a year to do the job. Representative Ames.
And my only comment on that is ditto. I agree with you.
Representative Ellery.
could we modify it to require a $2 bill be used?
We could, but that might not be a good idea. All right, any other comments? Okay. Thank you, and we will close the work session on HB 116. I'm now going to open the public hearing on HB 1054 relative to the Northern Border Alliance Program Fund. Representative Paulette.
We heard testimony about how few people were coming across that narrow stretch of northern border. And my reaction was that's because we have this Northern Border Alliance program in place. It's so small. Now, I did raise questions whether it needed as much money as it got after hearing that, but I'm not in favor at all of eliminating the Northern Border Alliance program. Keep it in place and keep our northern border secure.
Yes,
This
Representative
has
Almy.
nothing to do with eliminating the Northern Border Alliance program. It has to do with removing every 2 years the excess that has not been spent because it was not needed back to the general fund.
Which then means that it has to be reallocated every 2 years.
Well, I take it, yes, it has to be, the way it's written, as I understand it, it does have to be reallocated every 2 years to continue anyway. But if they spend $1,000 of it and don't spend the rest in the 2 years when everybody is worried about immigration from Canada,
Okay.
then I think Canada is also worried about immigration from the U.S., by the way.
Well, I think one of the things that they were saying was the what's that? The whole broad area there, not tri-state area, the Swanton. Thank you. That there has been an increase in that area, and they are claiming not much of an increase in our area. But I think the concern was that if we get rid of our, if we don't refund ours to the correct level, wouldn't it be human nature that people would then start funneling across the northern New Hampshire border? Representative Fellows.
Yes. So this bill does only one thing. Right now, that's a non-lapsing fund. So the money goes in, and at the end of the year, if there's any left over, it's not sent to, it doesn't become surplus. And they would need an appropriation every year anyway. There's really no reason why this can't be treated like a regular budget item and appropriations made for it every 2 years. I looked up what this money can be spent for. It can be spent on overtime for officers, which can be state police, or it can be local police or Homeland Security, or even Fish and Game. It can be used for training of those participating officers, including the overtime that they might need when they're participating in the training. They can use it for equipment, but the area they're covering is restricted to within 25 miles of the border. So, and it's wooded. That's one of the issues about people could come through there. So what would they need for equipment? Maybe they'd need some ATVs. I don't think many people would try to come over in the winter, but maybe some snowmobiles, not any huge expensive piece of equipment. And the other restriction is that, well, they can't use it for confidential informants, and they can't use it to supplant any local budgets. So it's primarily based on expenditures for overtime and for just regular hourly rate. I looked at the budget, at the expenditures so far this year, what they had, not the budget, the expenditure report, and they hadn't really spent very much. I can't remember how much, but it wasn't very much, and it was primarily for the salaries. So I don't think that there's any loss to the program for having the amount of money lapse at the end of the year and treating it just like a regular fund.
I would just ask the question rather than making a statement. The question in my mind would be, at a time, is this the right time to do something like this when we know that we have a huge concern at the southern border, and we have seen numbers increasing dramatically on the northern side. I would just ask why now? It might be something to, let's just see how things go for a while before making a drastic change. Yes, Representative Leapley.
Thank you. I think it's precisely for the reason you say, right? Because across our budget, our needs change every single year. And if our budget is locked into these savings accounts for different uses, then we can't be responsive. So I think we do it for exactly the reason you're saying. Like this year, maybe they're going to spend their entire allotment, which is great. That's what the money's there for. But it doesn't mean that if they're not spending it this year, that they're definitely going to need twice as much the next year, right? So I think exactly to your point, if we want to be responsive, we shouldn't just let money like build up in these little pockets. We should let it be accessible. Because yes, this year maybe they do need it all.
Representative Almy.
Yes, we did get verified by the attorney. What do they call him? The district attorney for New Hampshire, who is part of the State Department, of the AG's office in D.C. on the data that showed that New Hampshire had something, what was it, 23 encounters and apprehensions, both encounters and apprehensions, whereas the rest of the sector had a great deal more. And the reason that seems to be true is that the part of the northern border is not just forested, it's also filled with brush. And it's pretty, I went and straddled with my sister a number of years ago, the beginning of the top lake in New Hampshire, which is very close to the border. And we bushwhacked, and it was really difficult going. And on Maine, when I was younger, there was a road that went straight through the middle of the northern woods of Maine and across the border into Canada, and everybody used it, and there was no border patrol at all. And they said these are the people that are going up with drugs. Use that. They manage their forests rather differently than we do. So.
Okay. Yes, Representative Rochford.
Again, I'm going to probably get off topic here, but just want to provide some perspective of what the border looks like up there. I'm from the area. My neighbor is a Border Patrol agent. Regardless of what we heard in testimony, there have been significant increases in apprehensions up there. His again, anecdotal testimony to me is it's people that largely are living in Montreal. The families have been there for a long time, and they're looking at what's going on with our border, and they're saying, hey, maybe now's the time to go. And they go. They're not bushwhacking primarily, what we're seeing. There's Hull Stream in Pittsburgh is a crossing point. It's, you can cross there and get your ankles wet, and that's where it is. But one of the things that we have to take into account is the size of our border. It's a very small border. It's 52 miles, 58 miles. But to put that into perspective, 58 miles, if you were standing down at the Hooksett Welcome Center, 58 miles will get you to Plymouth. That's a huge amount of territory. I mean, we say it's a small amount of territory, but it really is quite large. So it wouldn't take much. I think anyone could probably slip through that here around this table. Yeah, I voted against this when it came on the House floor a year ago, because quite frankly, I don't think it's the state's responsibility to be enforcing our national borders. But the reality is, again, from up there, hearing the people up there, the concerns of the people that I live with and grew up with, it is a concern of what's happening. And it isn't, the picture that we're getting down here is different than what's actually happening up there. I get it. This is all about a lapsing fund versus a non-lapsing fund. I would be, I think that it's taken me a year to get to this place, but I think the fund is worthwhile. I think the program is worthwhile. And, at the end of the day, it may or may not make a difference whether it lapses or not. I don't know. But if it means showing support for the program, again, I've come 180 degrees on this, and after listening to my neighbors, I think that I would vote against this 1054. I think it has merit, and I want to signal that it does have merit to the people that I live with up north. So that's just my thoughts on it.
Thank you. Representative Elberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the pieces of information that I found particularly important was that we already get federal money and we haven't used all of it. And we're not looking at getting rid of the program. We are simply saying, let's lapse the fund and reappropriate as we need it. So if the fund is entirely used, as Representative Leapley said, entirely used within the biennium, we're happy it's being used for its stated purpose. And if we need as much, again, fine. If we don't need as much, we can consider it. But we should be looking at the fact that we're not using the funding that we already have for that purpose and take that into account. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll close the work session on HB 1054. Now open the work session on HB 1193 relative to the establishment of a child care tax credit program.
So if I will,
Yes.
Ken, Mr. Chairman, this was a bill that I actually worked on quite a bit over the summer, and I think Representative Sweeney told the committee that he had a similar bill that got in a day before mine did. So I was not allowed to put my bill in. So we combined the two characteristics of the bill, and what we got was not what either one of us had intended. And then there was some questions at OLS of, who, did we miss a cut? We missed a cutoff date for revision. I've got some amendments that are not quite done yet that I think would clarify some of the questions that were brought up in the committee. In speaking with some folks on the other side of the aisle on this and in the other chamber, I had some good recommendations on the fact that, and this was a confusion point when at testimony, is we have a scholarship program now in the state for lower income folks. And the design of this was actually to continue to use the scholarship program for those folks, but it's just that next step up that needs help. I mean, it's that, when you make $1 or $2 more than the cutoff line and you miss out, you actually take a step back rather than a step forward. And that's what this was designed to do, is to catch that middle point. And then, the means testing was also to the point where if you made above a certain point, you wouldn't qualify. So it was initially really designed to hit a certain segment of people that wasn't captured in the version that we got. If we could, I would like a little more time on this to work on this, and come up with a better amendment. If not, I understand and would let it be.
Representative Ames.
I think that is what we need. We need a little more time, if we can have it, to get that information that you've developed, get the new draft amendment, and understand it and act on it. But we need a little time to do that. I think we've got the time. I hope we do.
Okay. Yes, Representative Platt.
Representative Rochefort might have answered my question. I don't know, but on line 11, it reads, the employee must earn between 103 and 50% of the federal poverty guidelines. And I circled 100%. Why couldn't they make lower than that? Is that because it's a separate section?
Well, that as it was my understanding, working with another official here, those folks earning less actually do qualify for a scholarship program already in the state of New Hampshire, which so we didn't want to. We wanted to ensure it was the people at most vulnerable and most risk, that the lower income earners, but we're still earning, we're still working, and the working poor, if you will, and maybe even one step a little bit above that, who are doing well. They're making progress in life. They're seeing successes, and that's the worst thing we want to see is when you're seeing successes in life. You take a program that they've that has helped that, and then all of a sudden knock them down, far back. So it was more of a gradual implementation over this, and that's one of the areas that really does need some work that I think a solution for.
How much time do you think you need for a solution?
I think I could have something next week. And, or I mean, if we wanted to collaborate with other folks on this, do a subcommittee like we were talking about, I think that, we could do that too. I think we have until March on this, to get it out of this committee. But I do have a lot of work put aside, that I've done on this. So I think I could probably move this along pretty quickly.
Okay, Representative Elmy.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that tax credits are a draw on our revenues, which is unpredictable unless you can do enough research to figure out, okay, how much is this likely to cost if we expand it to 300% or whatever of poverty.
There's a limit on this, 10 million.
So if there is a limit on it of 10 million, that may very well be less than they get in applications, and you need to try to do all of the work to figure out what are you going to do? Is it going to be prorated like the research and development tax credit? What would the timing be in terms of people finding out whether they were going to get enough so that they could afford to pay for the child care?
Sure.
So thank you. Yes, and it was based on the research tax credit, and that's where we kind of took the bulk of the structure of this. And at the end of the day, the people are gonna the residents are gonna benefit immediately because their employer is gonna pay for their child care. It would be the employer that's taking that risk, and it would be delayed a year, and they would know, it may not be 100%. It may be, depending on how the popularity of the program is. I set the and again, I'm speaking for another representative here, but when I did the research over the summer, I put the number at 10 million because I wanted a guardrail on it. I didn't want it to be a runaway program. I didn't want it to be $100 million program, but I wanted it to be something where somebody, if employers were taking part in it, there would be enough in there for, if you set it at $500,000, I mean, that's going to chew that up if you've got 100 employers taking care of it. So that was the thought process. But yes, there's a stop on it, and the stop was intentional because we don't want this to be a runaway program.
Yeah. As the research and development tax credit became.
And that's
we started it at 1 million, I think, and but not 1 million, but we started it at a 1, and a few years later, pressure from the BIA had gotten it up to 10, and at that point, people said, "Hey, wait a minute," and stopped the growth of it, but. Anytime they could come in and say, we need 15 because they are having to prorate it.
Yeah, and I think that we have an opportunity as we can talk about what's the right number. I mean, I took advantage. I'm one that has taken advantage of the research tax credit. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's funded, equipment investments. It's funded a lot of things. So having used some of these things to grow a business, stabilize a business, having been affected, having not been able to grow a business because I don't have childcare or my employees don't have childcare. I can, I was not a small business person, but these are the kinds of things I think we can help in. But, we are the experts on tax credits, whether we like it or not, right? Under this, under the gold dome. So that's why I'd like some more time to really work and chew this up. And if it doesn't have legs, it doesn't have legs. But I think that knowing the topic of childcare, I think we owe it to the people in New Hampshire to put a little time into it and at least see if this is the right avenue or the right direction to do this.
Yeah, the topic is really important. The problem is that the cost is incredibly huge.
Representative Fellows.
Thank you. I like the idea of people getting more childcare help. When I look at this, to try to put it together seems to me to be really complicated, because one of the things Representative Barry told us is that the people who qualify for the existing program, which are like the vouchers, that they get different amounts of money depending on what their income is. And in the fiscal note, it tells us that they call that the Child Care Scholarship Program, and that the people in that program can have an income up to 250% of the poverty limit. So there are people already in that program that are kind of like aging out of it, that their voucher, I'll call it a voucher, it shrinks. So to try to put two different sources feeding help for childcare, I think that they're not going to be in sync, because the business is going to help with their people, some of which maybe are already, there may be somebody in the existing program that's getting close to that, to say they're at 200% of poverty. So they're getting some money, and then they're going to fill in different amounts for different employees, depending if they don't get any now. And I think that the whole thing, to try to meld the two together, seems really complicated.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. And that was one of the areas where, when we put the two bills together, Representative Sweeney and I were like, we got to fix this because this isn't what we intended, and this is going to get real confusing, and it did get confusing. I think I have something that will cut that confusion, because when we were blame it on my rookie status. I wasn't clear on some of the dates and cutoff lines and whatnot. But these were all, he and I were communicating, and lo and behold, the date, the time passes, and we missed it. But you're absolutely right, 100%. When we heard the testimony, when you start mixing all these programs together, this is far more confusing than I had ever intended, and it's definitely, and it's more confusing than he ever intended, and we recognize that. That's why I think we can get something that would, at least, if we can cut back some of the static, if you will, and focus on what we're trying to do here, I think it would make more sense. And a little more time, I think, would help with that.
Representative Almy.
Yeah, there's another problem here, which is that page 2 is a totally different program and expense, and isn't even in the fiscal note. The child care tax credit for expenditures for maternity or paternity leave greater than 12 weeks, which is another thing that the Democrats would like to have. But it's kind of, does this stay in there? Because it's not, the fiscal note didn't seem to notice it.
Yeah, that's a good question. That was not part of the work that I had initially brought forward as part of Representative Sweeney's, which, again, when we were talking about it, maternity and paternity leave, as a small employer, I can speak for a small employer. That's something that you'd love to be able to provide and give, but there's generally not a lot left in the pot to do that. So we felt that incentivizing this, at the end of the day, this bill just incentivizes employers to do certain things, and hopefully there's some help to do it. That's a good question. That was, we can chew that up. I like when he mentioned that to me, I like the idea. Again, I think in my business we've had 6 kids, over the course of 15 years. So not my kids, but employees' kids. But so I can relate to that. I understand that, and I understand what folks go through. So, but you're right. That wasn't part of the fiscal note. I don't know why that was missed, but I think, we can, and that may or may not stay. We can talk about that.
And another thing which may be or may not be complicating is that the on Community Development Loan Fund, I think it's called, I can't remember now. This has been going for a very long time, and one of the things that it does is to provide money to employers to build childcare centers that could have people from outside of the business, but that are basically for the business, that get tax credits that they then have to go sell to people in order
Right.
to do it. I don't think it's done a lot of childcare though.
Yeah, if I may, I looked at that. I think there was about 17 states around the country that do something for childcare, and of course, we don't have an income tax for individuals. So a lot of those programs are based on individual income tax. Some of them are based on exactly what you were talking about, large employers building things. And I think you're right. You can buy tax credits for that. But, aside from a few larger employers, it's mostly small employers, that are paying business profit tax or business enterprise taxes. So, being creative on how to work around that is where we targeted that. But it's not a new idea. It's not a new concept. There's many states, and I don't think any state is exactly the same. Everyone's doing it differently, and so I think we have an opportunity here.
Okay. Seeing no more hands, we'll close the work session on HB 1193. Next up, HB 1470, establishing a study committee on the feasibility and impact of low-income housing tax credit. Representative Plett.
I just have questions. What possible tax credit could there be that applies to low income that's a state tax? Swept? They're not paying that directly anyway. If they're low income, more likely renting. So I'm not sure what the study committee would come up with anything, but I'm not opposed to a study committee.
Representative Almy.
Yes, I'm not sure where I stand on this now because I really don't like tax credits, but what they mean by a low-income housing tax credit is a tax credit for one or more groups that are together building a low-income housing development. Not directly to low-income people, who of course don't need a tax credit.
And the tax credit is applied to what? The BPT?
Yeah, it is something that is done in most places in the country, the ones with income taxes or big sales taxes. But I personally don't understand what 3 people meeting together after they've been appointed by the Speaker and the President of the Senate are going to come up with in a few months.
Representative Fellows.
So I have, when the sponsor was here, he gave us a piece of paper with something written in to be an amendment, but we don't have a official amendment, do we?
No. But the only thing that he did was he said that they could Also study other tax incentives to increase the production and affordability of housing. The committee may recommend proposed legislation. Which it could do anyway, but this way I guess it can keep going until November.
Yeah, so I would support this if we could get the amendment, except that where it says the addition and other tax incentives, I would just like to cross out the tax. So it could be they can study low income housing tax credits and other incentives to, look at the possibly helping the situation, just not to be so restrictive that it's even just tax incentives. And my expectation would be that whoever's on the committee would be spending pretty much all of their time with New Hampshire Housing Authority, and to better understand what's already in place and seeing if the Housing Authority has any recommendations on what would be useful.
The Housing Authority is present. May want to make a comment.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. Ben Frost, Deputy Director and Chief Legal Officer at New Hampshire Housing. We are the state's administrator and allocator of the federal low-income housing tax credit, which, as Representative Almy described, is an incentive for private market developers to do this sort of stuff. And it works really well.
A little closer to the mic, please.
And many states do have a state low-income housing tax credit. We stand ready to help a study committee, even if it is just 3 people, to provide as much information as we possibly can on what other states are doing and what might be appropriate for New Hampshire.
Representative Ames.
Yeah. I sort of asked this question last time, but I don't think it was answered. And I did some exploring subsequently. My question relates to, for states as opposed to the federal level, what exactly are the taxes against which the credit is taken? And in New Hampshire, as we all know, there's no income tax nor a general sales tax. But I did find out that in some other states, the credit is taken against, well, in one case, the insurance tax, another case, a business tax would be some parallel to our own business profits tax. And I don't know whether you've got more information on because that's something that stuck out at me. We're talking about a tax credit against what? Where's the money coming from, or coming out of what pot? We really need to know that. And so if you've got any insights on that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, just off the cuff, Representative Ames, I think the most likely taxes to take your credit against would be the business profits tax and the business enterprise tax, also the insurance premiums tax. Those are subject to other tax credits already in existence in New Hampshire. We would all obviously look at others, but those are the big drivers, and those are the ones where the businesses that might be investors in this sort of operation would have an interest.
Commenting on this, that this is the kind of matter that I think we should seriously look at and explore. I'm not sure we can afford going very deep with such a tax credit, this kind of tax credit, but let's look at it and figure that out. Housing, low-income housing is We don't have enough of it. I mean, that's all I can say on that score by a long shot. And so why not? Let's explore it. I would like to see an amendment that added to the members of the membership of the committee. I think 3 is, I'm not sure I've seen a committee like this set up with just 3 people. Maybe it is a practice. I don't know, but it gets to be very difficult to organize meetings and to have the work force in the committee sufficient to get the job done, and to have a range of points of view too. And we definitely want to be sure that the range of viewpoints on this kind of issue in the legislature is represented on the committee. It's hard to do that with 3 members.
Okay, Representative Leapley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. So what I hear you saying is that other states have incentives in place. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. It seems to me like what I hear people addressing is whether they think a tax credit is a good idea or not. I don't think that's the question. I think the question is precisely to explore this, right? Like that's what a study committee does. And what I hear from business owners, for example, I'm thinking like, Main Street, Manchester, you look and you're like, are there apartments above every single one of these businesses? And as it turns out, there aren't. And why not? Because it's super expensive, right? So are there ways that we can support people who would want to invest in our main streets and, put in the sprinkler system, or, could they do this floor and then that floor? It seems like basically what we're saying is, do we want to help solve this problem? Do we want to sit around a table and talk about, what are other states doing? What are other incentives beyond tax incentives? And I think it's true that 3 people's really small. Having attended the big study on worldwide taxation, I found it really helpful to invite experts in. And here, I feel like that's how we grow and learn what's out there as possible, and maybe even innovate as a state, because I think we are very innovative. And I think it creates a space where we can think about this very, very important issue. So I'm in favor of this. Thanks. Thank you.
Representative Elberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Frost, are you aware of programs through the federal GSA, the General Services Administration, and Department of Transportation, where they are looking to basically offload some of their buildings that they're not using anymore? And I see that you are. Are there any unused federal buildings in the state that some work could be applied to?
Thank you for that question. And I acknowledge that GSA does have a process for surplusing surplus federal property. I've not looked into this closely. I know that, well, I hesitate to bring it up, but the McIntyre building in Portsmouth is one such building that was federal property, and the city's trying to figure out what to do with it. But I'm sure there are others as well. With regard to state surplus property, yes. In fact, there is a very effective process for state agencies to declare property that they control as surplus to the needs of the state. And that goes to other agencies first to see if they have the need for the property and can transfer it from one agency to another. And then if that is not the case, then it gets put through a process where it's offered, and depending upon how the property was acquired by the state, then it is offered to the municipality in which it is situated and or New Hampshire Housing. And in some circumstances, we have a preemptive right to acquire those properties if we want to. We have a great working relationship with the Department of Transportation, and we're in negotiations right now on several parcels of property.
I was on a couple of Zoom calls with the GSA and the Federal Department of Transportation at the end of last year. They are happy to not give, but help to give at incredibly low rates, including wonderful financing systems as bonds, as loans rather than as bonds. And I would hope that we are looking at federal properties, if there are any in the state. I don't know enough about federal properties in the state.
With your prompting, I suspect we will be.
Please
Thank
do.
you.
And I have, they would not do any recordings, but I took slides of everything.
Thank you.
Representative Rochefort.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking back at the bill here. It's pretty open-ended. I mean, there's not really a lot of, the objectives are not defined per se, other than it's to study a feasibility of a low-income tax credit. You may have said this before. Is there some type of federal grant program behind this, or is this strictly what we can do as a state?
Representative, great question, and I think the answer is remains to be seen. I'm sorry that this.
Yeah, I know. That's
right
part,
there.
I get it every day.
I think I can do that without unplugging it. So, in other states, there are state tax credits that work in alignment with the federal low-income housing tax credit, and it's possible for New Hampshire to design something like that to leverage the federal programs. Also, it's possible to come up with something that is flexible and can do that, leveraging federal resources, or that also works independently of federal resources in cases where the federal programs don't work that well.
Okay, thank you. And can I add, I, like my colleague here, I would support this. This is a need, especially in my part of the world. Housing is a huge issue, and I look at it. We've got businesses that can't grow because they can't hire people, and they can't hire people because they have no place to put them. We've got buildings on Main Street in Lancaster that have apartments. The only way to get them is the companies to buy the buildings. So to put these in there, the only thing that I would actually perhaps put together as an amendment is to change the spectrum of the study, is to look at low income and workforce housing, because it's not just low income housing that we're needing up north. It's workforce housing. It's people that have a skill, have a trade, but even with that, they can't find a place to live. And I personally, as you couldn't tell, I like tax credits. I've used them. I think that they can be managed. But again, this is an opportunity to study it. I mean, it's not costing us anything to take a look at, and at the end of the day, we may find out that it's not works. But I think I could get behind this with a couple of tweaks.
Okay. Yes, Representative.
I would just like to know, is someone from this committee going to stop by and see the sponsor about making an amendment?
I'm happy to.
Is that all right with you, Mr. Chairman?
Well, the sponsor doesn't have to make the amendment.
Well, I understand that. I
But
just
somebody may
would
want
like to stress. And follow up on this. Instead of 2 members of the House, what would this committee think of a higher number, like 5? Okay, thank you.
She said at least 5.
All right, so this would be one bill that we will
So,
most likely not exec tomorrow, because it sounds like some additional information is
So-
needed. Yes,
so,
Representative
so I
Fellows.
would like to suggest 4 House members and specify that 2 are Democrats and 2 are Republicans. I'm thinking that Republicans are really good at focusing on tax credits. And I think the Democrats may have some other perspectives. I don't want to get, end up with only looking at tax credits, because I think that there are other opportunities too.
Okay. Representative Almy?
Yes, Thank you. I set up 12 years ago now a committee to try to do something about the massive condominium problems. And the Senate took their second member off it and nobody added an extra House member. 4 is really hard to get a quorum.
Well, there'll be one senator.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean 3 House members and 1 senator? That's what we had. What? 4 House, 1 senator. That's
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, so it sounds like a couple members are going to work together to come up with a possible amendment on this.
Yeah. I just wanted to add something. There a lot, I don't think it's been terribly effective, but a lot of work has been put into workforce housing already. The low income has had, the governor put 100 million into it this last term, and was forced by the executive council to add a little bit of low-income housing in it. I'm not sure how that's working, but I don't know if it expanded into low income. Low income is a very different kind of animal than workforce, in my opinion, at least. But it does include the workforce part that most people don't think of as workforce, which is all of the supporting characters that keep a business working. Your cleaners and maybe the secretaries, if there are any left.
Did you have a response to that, or not that you have to have one? I was just
I would note that workforce housing has a specific and precise definition under New Hampshire law, and that is found in RSA 674-59, I believe. And it is rental housing that is affordable to a family of 3 that makes up to 60% of the area median income. And that's at a 30% cost burden. That's paying no more than 30% of their income. Or a home for purchase that is affordable at 100% of the median income, area median income for a family of 4. So that it's very clear what constitutes workforce housing. Low income housing, it depends on which definition you're looking at, and there are multiple definitions. Generally speaking, it's on the rental side, it is close to the definition of workforce housing. So I think there would be no harm in adding workforce housing, because they are oftentimes roughly equivalent, workforce and low-income housing. Where they differ is on the purchase side, because we don't typically talk about low-income and purchase housing together.
okay. Representative Elberger had her hand
Thank you,
up.
Mr. Chairman. Just pointing out that in Nashua, where we have, just as many other communities, a significant homeless population, many of them are working 2 jobs. A couple I spoke with, each of them was working 2 jobs and still could not afford a place to rent. So I would support the notion of adding workforce housing into this.
Representative Almy, followed by Fellows.
I'm not sure whether we'd need to define workforce again within this bill if we include workforce, because the governor's program was definitely not focused on 60% and below.
Is there a definition of workforce housing in the RSAs or no? No.
In that one section.
Yes, that is
Okay.
674-59.
Okay.
It had to be referenced.
You could also, on other levels of income, you could make reference to RSA 204C colon 57, I believe, which is a subdivision in the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority statute that deals with the Affordable Housing Fund. And so there are different levels of income that are very specific, similar to the way workforce housing is defined.
Representative Fellows.
So that last one you mentioned, is that for buying a house or is that for apartments or
That's either.
either? Well, I think that's why we need this study committee. To,
Could you give us that reference again?
The second reference is RSA 204-C colon 57, I think. It's around 57. And the other one is 674 colon 59. That's workforce housing.
That's easier to find when we search.
Okay. Anything else? Seeing none, close the work session on HB 1470. We have one left. And it's 12:30, but maybe we can finish this up. Unless anyone's opposed to trying to finish that up before lunch. No, seeing none. Okay, I'm going to open the work session on HB 1613. Establishing a trust fund for money from soil and water environmental contamination court settlements. Representative Platt.
I often lead off, and maybe I shouldn't because I'm getting, but to me, this is a no-brainer to pass because it's money that's coming for violations of, for soil and water environmental contamination, yet it's going into the general fund. We should put it in a trust fund for that purpose. And it says if it's not after 2 years, it could be moved. And I think that's a good idea.
Representative Almy.
Thank you. We discussed this a lot in caucus, and there are a number of problems with it that Representative Moose is already working on. And we'd really like to give him the time to absorb all of for instance, the example he was using of contamination, I forget which substance it was, but it was outlawed in the 70s, and it was contaminating on land, and they've cleaned up the land, but in the process it went down into the waters. We don't know if there's any way to clean up that substance in the water. In the water is a very difficult thing. And so the money would just sit there for 2 years and then get put in these other, and 2 years doesn't seem like quite enough to figure out how we're going to handle this either. And it's obvious that it would only be for smaller level contaminations, because when it's PFAS, they're going to put it all in one new section. So there could be quite a lot of these little things for a while, hanging around for 2 years before they go off into one of the two funds. And that isn't what they really meant to be doing. So he'd already realized some of this, and he's working on it, and we're communicating. We'd like to be able to put it off for a later time.
Okay. Representative.
Would like to see an amendment come back in here and
Yeah.
put it into a committee study or something, subcommittee or something.
Yeah, he has a partial amendment now, but it was just his first draft that we all got.
Well, are you looking for a work study on once his amendment comes back, or?
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
good.
Oh, wait a minute, I meant work sessions, but, yeah,
Yeah, I
okay.
figured you didn't mean
Yeah.
it.
okay. Anything else on this one? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the work session on HB 1613. Before we go, I just want to, let's just recap on the ones that need more time. Obviously, the one we just discussed, 1613. Sounds 1193, the child care tax program. Because this whole list is the list for tomorrow to be potentially exec along with 1254, which I see we have an amendment before us. What other, was there anything else? Let's see. Representative Doucette's bringing an amendment on 1525, but we should have that for tomorrow. Representative Plett, you're going to have an amendment for 1203.
Jennifer Ford put it in for me.
Okay, so you just have to make sure that we have that for tomorrow.
Yes.
So other than that, it looks like there's only two that we're holding off right now. Is that true? 1193 and 1613, or I feel like there was one other I might be missing. Yeah, 12. That's Representative Plett is bringing that. 1470. Oh, right. Right. So 1470. We need more time on that.
What did you say about 1389? That's the lottery one, is that
1389. That one.
need an amendment to it? That's the one to put back
Oh.
35%.
No.
No.
I think,
That was the anonymous.
yeah, we found that had some errors in it,
I
right?
1389 to me is an ITL for the moment.
The notes I have is that we're either going to go ITL or IS on that. So I think we can do that tomorrow. Just
The one with the putting the 35% in is the first one, HB 1203.
And I'd like to just mention that the amendment that I passed out, I, for the first time, read the two parts of it together, and they don't make sense together. There is one word that I need to change on line 20, which is not the 184 days of the meals and rooms tax requirement.
microphone, please.
Oh, sorry. We need to change just one thing. On line 20, change.
The amendment that
This
got
is
passed out.
1254.
1254.
Yeah, that we didn't discuss today.
What does that have to change to?
To 30, because it's 30 above.
So 184 changes to 30.
Yeah,
Okay.
it would be much different limit
Can you
than,
make sure that we have that for
than the rooms and meals tax,
tomorrow?
which, by the way, is 184 days.
Okay. So you can get
can you,
that.
I didn't catch that.
So
what's the
line, so
change?
the amendment that we have for 1254, line 20, it says 184 days. That's going to change to 30.
And I'll go get that as soon as we've had our other meeting.
Do we have two amendments?
I just have one. It's 1254. The amendment.
Where's line 20? Mine only goes
Well,
to 11.
And you got the
No,
shorthand
you've
version. I
got the
guess.
original one. I put one on in your place. It's Almy Bucco. It's a joint amendment.
Oh, okay.
All right. I think, so really it's the last three that we will not take up tomorrow. 1193, 1470, and 1613. The rest of them we will take up tomorrow. Plus 1254, and Representative Almey's going to get an update to line 20. All right, I don't have anything else. Let me just look at the schedule for next week. So we'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock for the exec session. And then the following week, actually the following week, what's that? It's not, Monday's a holiday, so we are not meeting Monday. We will meet Tuesday. I haven't put that together yet as to what that might be, a combination of public hearings. I think there's either 3 or 4 new bills that we have in Ways and Means. I don't know. I looked before we started, there was 18 bills in our committee. I'm not sure it was 28 or 29 a few days ago. So we dispatched, I believe, 11 of them. So I think there's 4 new ones. So, so the plan is to meet Tuesday and Wednesday next week. Can't tell you exactly what that'll be yet. It'll probably be a combination of work session, public hearing, and possibly exec.
Just one day.
I don't know yet, because it kind of depends what happens tomorrow as well.
Oh, okay.
So. What's that? Tomorrow? I've been kind of sticking with 10. I mean, but that's subject to change until this goes in tomorrow. But it wouldn't be any earlier than 9:30. Do you have a constraint? Okay. All right.
Tuesdays is a problem for us.
Oh.
Tuesday, but our meeting is
Okay. So you'd rather start at 10 on Tuesday for that reason. Okay. Yeah, I knew there was something. Okay. So it's Wednesday that potentially could start at 9:30 if we have a need for that. All right, that's all I have. If there's no questions, then we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Meeting.